everyone, Sarah here, and I wanted to let you know that today's conversation may not be suitable for little ears.
Welcome to the Tell Me More podcast, where we invite you to be a part of real conversations with real women as we navigate the normal thoughts, feelings, and events in life as Christians. I'm Jess McKinney, one of your co-hosts.
I am Lydia Florence.
Oh, sorry, I'm Sarah Hopkins.
You busy? What you doing over there?
Deleting emails. Sorry.
I'm like, are we ready to record? And Sarah's like, I'm just going to delete this email real quick. That's
busy
fine.
And important.
Well done, though. I'm impressed with your multitasking skills.
I'll sneak this in really quick. Sorry.
I don't want to talk about my inbox because it's a nightmare. It would stress people out.
Whose phone did
Catherine Fiola.
Yep.
Sorry, Katie.
I did not do that. Katie,
it was
I
me.
did not do that. You've been
She
ousted.
would admit it, though. She would.
Is she the one that had 72 unread messages? No.
It was 17,000 or something like
It
that.
was someone else, and I won't out her.
Oh,
but
well,
we
see,
were.
Now
I can't. I'll tell you after.
Katie, I love you. You're one of my best friends. You know that.
But your email inbox
your
is
email is
apparently
stressful.
atrocious.
This was their text message. Like they something wonderful had happened, and so they screenshot it to say, "Hey, look at this answered prayer," because it's something we've been praying about for a long time. And you're in the middle of rejoicing, and then I see 72 unread messages. I said, I'm going to rejoice, but then we're going to have to talk about this.
It gives me hives.
72.
But it's their business phone as well. So
Well,
that's what.
yeah.
72.
Just means they're more
I'm
popular
pretty
than
sure
me.
hers is worse. Now, I used to be guilty of that because I had a junk account and junk email account that was on my phone. And so it showed up as all these unread messages. And I'm like, yes, but I'm literally never going to check them.
I am a no notifications gal.
Yeah,
like,
I don't do those.
I am a.
Oh,
I
it
can't
doesn't
have any
notify
red.
me.
I can't have any red bubbles on my
You want
iPhone
to see what
screen.
I did to my phone, you guys? I made it all
It's
pretty.
aesthetic. That's beautiful.
How did you do that?
With
It's
shortcuts.
like your home and your office.
I know.
I say that I want that. There's no way I'm going to sit there and do that.
It did take a while,
Yep.
but it does keep me from being stressed because my message notifications and all that, it doesn't pop up until I actually open the app, which I'm not mad about.
Have you ever put your phone in grayscale?
No.
So
Sounds depressing.
Well, so one of the, I don't know who they are and what tests they've run, but they have done tests. So if your phone is in grayscale, you'll be on it less because it's not as exciting to look
Stimulating,
at.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
That makes sense.
It makes you sad. You just think, I don't care for this.
Huh.
So every now and then, like for
You want
Lent,
to cut down on your time on your phone.
one Lent, I put it in grayscale, and it really was difficult.
Did it measure? Do you have the thing that measures your screen time and all that?
Yeah, I don't remember. It was less because I didn't want to be on it.
Right.
A moment for our colorblind brothers and sisters and just those who see the world that way.
It's true. Chuck's one of them.
Oh, is he?
He's red-green colorblind. Yes. This is a funny story. Babe, I'm so sorry if you're listening. He went shopping one day for pants. She knows the story. So she's laughing. And he came home and he was like, you are never going to guess what I got. I got these pants for $6. They are khakis. They fit perfectly. I'm so excited. Y'all, they were salmon colored.
They were not khaki.
Could not tell. He was so excited. And I had this internal like, do I tell you?
honey.
And I was like, those are pink.
That's hilarious.
I think he should have. He kept them.
He did. He wore them.
Like I think
Yeah.
salmon, men who rock salmon, there's a confidence there that you think, you know that
Or
looks
you're
good on you.
colorblind.
Or colorblind.
It's one or the other.
I tried to give it to you, and your wife kicked it out of the way.
That's
I'm
funny.
sorry. He could tell so many stories on me, but that one just got me. I was like, I can't. I did hold up that side by side. Have y'all seen that where It shows like a fall day out over the lake and all of the beautiful colors that you see, like the reds, and there's a little bit of green and there's orange and there's yellow and it's all bright and everything. And then next to it, it shows, if you're red, green, colorblind, what you see. And it's a lot of browns, like different shades of brown. And I held it up to Chuck because I was like, can you tell the difference between these photos? And he was like, no. I was
Wow.
like, that's so sad. But they make glasses now.
I do.
That
Has he
you can
tried 'em?
wear. His brother has some.
Did he? This is a weird question. Did he think, oh, this is what I've been missing and I want this all the time? Or is he kind of like, meh?
No, he was kind of like, meh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like he was like,
Interesting.
wow, that's a lot. But also, I think you'd want to wear them all the time because otherwise you're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
Right. Thinking
So-
about what you're always missing out on.
yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting. Huh. Yeah. So there you go. Okay. Well, that's completely unrelated to today's topic, but here we are.
Comfortable in today's topic.
I know. I was going to say, if you can't tell by the title of the episode today, it's going to be a vulnerable one, which is great. But
I really want to sing the
Here for it.
song, but I'm not going to.
Which
I
one?
mean, it's just
Which
not
one?
me
Okay, I'm
that's doing
gonna.
it.
Let's talk about sex, baby.
There you go.
It's the face for me.
I know. And she grabbed the microphone.
This is my moment. Why you combed out your hair before we got out here?
Can you,
That's
can you add a little reverb to that on the back end so that she can just...
This is my moment.
I'm a child of the 90s,
Oh,
you know.
girl.
If I was
Are
just
you-
wearing.
Are you?
Yeah.
Are you like you are a child in the 90s?
Yeah, I mean, I was born in the 90s.
Yeah.
But still heavily influenced by 90s culture, even though I didn't live in the 90s for that long.
Are you influenced because it's all back and everything you see in Target now has already been?
No.
Oh,
No,
my goodness.
no,
the mom
because,
jeans.
like,
I can't.
I had to live through that the first time.
Yep.
Now, granted, I was small,
In
but
Oshkosh Bagosh, that doesn't count.
I'm not into
Yeah.
the resurgence of some of these trends. Some of them I'm like, oh, cool, this is, back in.
Yeah.
Like, I love a good brown lipstick, honestly. That was big in the 90s.
Oh, what's the one? My friends and I all had. It was an Origins stick lipstick. Oh, I wish they were here.
Like, those are nice.
None of us are the same color, like the same.
I
Yeah.
love
skin
a good
color,
brown
yeah,
lipstick,
skin
but
tone.
you bring back, so help me God, if low-rise jeans come back,
Oh, I hate those. But I think
I
they are coming back, actually.
we'll stage a coup.
You just don't have to wear them. I'm not mad that, like, flare jeans for the third time now, because, they were a product of the 60s and 70s, have come back around.
They
not
look
mad
cute
about that.
on our
Because
stature.
we short.
Exactly.
Yes, I know. I love that. That makes me really happy.
So it's not
But
all
there
bad.
are other things where I'm just like,
That needed to stay dead.
I did see something on Instagram the other day. And it was, I can't remember who it was, but she was basically like, these can't be flattering on anyone. I'm going to try them. So she goes in the dressing room and she tries on these things. And I mean, she's like a very fit, in shape woman, and it looked terrible. And I was like, point proven.
I like the crochet bathing suits.
Oh, yeah, I do too. I
What?
do too. I know.
Who thought, what would look really great on the beach? My grandma's blanket.
I know.
Oh, bless it.
Good times. Okay. Anyway, so we are talking about sex today, but specifically about stewarding our sexuality well. And I just am interested to know, because when I was growing up in the 80s, it was not a topic that, like, you really talked about out in the open, even in your family. Like, my parents didn't talk about it a lot. We weren't as inundated, I don't think, at that point on, like, television and commercials and things like that, like we are now. There also just wasn't as much access to that kind of stuff, I think, but so we didn't talk about it a lot. So it actually, growing up, felt a little bit taboo to even talk about. It seemed like one of those things that was off limits for, like, especially in mixed company.
Oh, yeah.
To talk about, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
for
So I don't know if that was your experience growing up. That was definitely mine. I do want to know, just because I'm interested, how your parents talked to you about sex, because mine was on accident, I think. Well, not on accident, but, like, they weren't ready, which I feel horrible about. But I had a neighbor across the street, and apparently she witnessed something and told me about it. And I went home and was like, Mom! And my mom was like,
Oh.
I guess we're going to talk about this now. And this is how she's told me about it, because I actually only remember certain pieces of it.
Yeah.
I do remember a very anatomically correct discussion about it, which was interesting. But that was about it. That was the talk for me. And so, I'm always like, please let me be the first one to tell my kid and them not come home and go, hey, Mom, what's this? Or like see it on TV. I'm very nervous about that, but that's a whole other topic. So
You said parents. It was parent.
Yes, correct. My mother, not my dad.
Dad was not involved, but we were on vacation and out on bicycles, which is not, my family did not do excursions. We didn't do vacations very often.
Yeah.
And we were out, and Mom's special time of the month came. And I just remember her saying, I have to go back, and Sarah's coming with me. So killjoy. And we go in, she does whatever she's doing, and then comes out, grabs my Magna Doodle that I had brought with me on vacation, and then proceeds to draw out, God bless, the feminine reproductive organs.
Listen, that's kind of impressive, actually.
That is seared into your brain. I know it is.
I never see a Magna Doodle the same way.
That's amazing.
So, and bless my mother. I mean, she was like, you know what? We're going to go in. And she was very upfront. We were never a family that shied away from it.
Sure.
But that's how I learned.
How old were you?
Oh, gosh, probably 10 or 11.
Okay. I think you were a little bit older than me. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I think I was a little younger. But again, they weren't planning to talk to me about it at that time.
Yeah. I learned a lot going. Well, no, I didn't. I didn't learn a lot going forward. You pick up different pieces, but I also had a very sheltered childhood.
Yeah.
So honestly, college was a big eye opener.
Yeah.
I learned a lot that freshman year.
Yeah.
Man, I got the period talk before I got the sex talk because I got my period when I was really young before my mom had ever had a chance to explain to me. So I thought I was dying when that happened.
Same.
So there was that conversation that I think
for it.
caught her off guard. She was like, oh, you're younger than I thought you might be when this happened. But then the sex talk was really, to my memory, not really a talk. It was more like when this is a story for another day. I am a homeschool failure. I have 5 siblings, but I got kicked out of being homeschooled and sent to public school, unlike my siblings who are success stories of homeschool. So when I got sent to public school, I think is when my parents were like, she's probably going to hear about this.
Yeah.
So we should maybe do something. And I remember them giving me some like books and things, be like, you should read about this. And
You should don't talk about it. Just read about it.
the only really distinct memories I have is that I think my parents did the best they could, but my mom especially was just very uncomfortable talking about stuff like that, which is funny because then, through the public school system, I did learn a lot about sex and, some things that were accurate, a lot of things that weren't.
Yep.
But then that translated when I got into college, I started working for a faith-based sexual health clinic and then ended up getting a job there. And I taught sex ed all the way through college and then full-time after college in 16 school districts in 3 states. We did 2-week curriculum.
Wow.
And like part of the drive was like trying to get parents involved with what we were teaching.
Yeah.
So it ended up becoming something that I was like, I see the need for parents to like educate their children about this. And I want them to have biblically based, but scientifically accurate, like information.
Yeah.
And
So you're just going to do this whole thing.
I'm not going to do this whole thing, but I do have a particular love and passion
Well,
for.
and I was going to say, you're going to be so prepared when you have children to have that talk. It's funny because Chuck and I have talked about it a little bit because we have girls.
Yeah.
So he's like, that will be you. I'm like, sure. Absolutely. But when I was growing up, I remember thinking, man, that's going to be so awkward. Like I was terrified of the idea of it. And now I'm like, nope, I want them to hear it from me.
Yes.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Definitely want them to hear it from me. So
It is awkward. I mean,
It is.
What? Okay, so it is what it is.
Yeah.
Just have to go on with it.
Yeah.
yeah.
So let's go on with it.
Let's go on with it.
Just
Okay,
kidding.
so we're talking about stewarding our sexuality. So it's actually not just talking about sex today, but I wanted to establish a few baseline things, and I wrote these down because I don't want to say them wrong. But A few baseline things so that we start our conversation off from the same spot and the same understanding, because there are so many directions we could go with this discussion. So first, when we talk about sexuality in men and women, what we are talking about is based on the belief that God created men and God created women, and they were given different organs and different chromosomes and all of the things, and we are not going to stray from that in our discussion today. Both of those are reflections of God in different ways, which we've actually addressed in the past, which is great. But so number one, we're starting with that. Secondly, we're starting with the understanding that we are all sexual beings because of the reproductive organs that we have been created with. And then third, stewarding our sexuality is not just about having sex within the context of marriage with our spouse of the opposite gender, although that is the biblical context for sex. But there's so much more to it when you think about singleness and marriage and like just the different stages of life. So we're going to try to get through a lot of those today, and we probably won't hit on everything. But those are kind of the baseline, like here's where we're starting. And then we'll get a little bit deeper into it here, because I'm going to ask, when we talk about sexuality, and I'm going to throw it to you actually. Yeah. Biblically, what are we talking about when we talk about stewarding our sexuality from a biblical standpoint?
Yeah. I mean, I want to hone in kind of on the, like that third point that you made, that when we talk about sexuality, as we're talking about here today, we're not just talking about sexual orientation. We're talking about the God-given functions and feelings of being a person with a distinct biological sex and a sex drive. And to be really clear that God has a positive view of sexuality. He's the one who made us sexual beings. He called it very good. This was his idea. But some of the very best teaching that I've heard that helped define kind of a holistic view of Christian sexuality centers around a specific Hebrew word that's used from the very beginning of the Bible.
I love when you do this.
So here we go. Buckle up. Here's your Bible lesson for the day.
Get a notepad and a pen.
The Hebrew word is yada. Not hard to say, which is great because some Hebrew words are a real doozy. But we see it first in Genesis 4:1. The verse is, "And Adam knew his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain." That word knew is yada. That's the Hebrew word. So to say that Adam knew Eve, he yada'd Eve, that paints a certain picture in our mind. And even if you haven't taken a single Hebrew language class ever in your life, the definition of the word yada there seems pretty clear, because to say that he knew his wife in the biblical sense, babies don't just come from knowing somebody, like shaking hands, being nice to meet you, So you could read that one verse, the way that word is used in that one verse, and think yada must mean sex, right? Yeah. And the answer to that is both yes and no. So the Hebrew word yada is a verb that means to know and to be known in a deeply intimate sense, but it is not just exclusively physical, which is, to your third point there. It can represent sex. It does in that verse I just read, but it also goes beyond that to signify this incredibly deep sense of intimacy and vulnerability and connection, both between people and also between God and people. And so this word yada is used over 900 times in the Old Testament, including instances that describe how God yadas, he knows and he loves us deeply. So Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know, yada, that I am God." We are to know God. Yada. Yeah. Psalm 139, 1-2 says, "O Lord, you have searched me and you yada me. You know, you yada. When I sit and when I rise, you perceive my thoughts from afar." So all this is to say, the significance of this is that it shows us that God's gift of sexuality, as we're talking about it today, is more than just as it relates to our physical senses. It does include that, but it is a part of a deeper gift of intimacy that God desires for us to have, whether we are married or we're single. So we were all made for yada. We are all sexual beings in that sense. But this is, a word that some people gag at, but like the erotic or like the physical act of sex is meant to be exclusively expressed within marriage, as, the Bible defines between a man and a woman. So yada is for everybody. The act of sex there is a specific context
Sure.
in which that's worked out. But sexuality as a whole is more than just the physical. It does include that, but it's more than that. And that's a great biblical ground for it, is looking at that word yadah and how that's used throughout Scripture.
That's interesting. It's very interesting.
This is weird. It's a pretty word. When you think of most of the words that we have in English to describe that, they're all kind of flat and lame sounding.
Yeah.
But it just sounds pretty.
Yeah.
Windowsill.
Get that tattooed on you.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Probably don't.
I want to know if anyone does for sure.
Probably somebody does. I'll bet somebody
You don't
does.
win anything,
Probably.
but if you do, send it to us.
Yes, please. That's awesome. Okay, well, talking about, and we addressed this early on. It was in the context of sex, but sexuality in general feels like this. I don't know. People get weird when they start to talk about it. Yeah,
Definitely.
Why? Why is that? Like, part of it, I think, is our upbringing.
Yeah, but it has been, I mean, when you look through history,
Yeah.
while they may have been different sections would talk about it a lot, they're more open with it. It was still done so with a taboo kind of, that's really private, and we've brought it to light kind of an idea.
That's a good way to say it. Like, it feels like something that's hidden. That is a very private thing that you shouldn't talk about with other people. And I'm not saying we should go around shouting from the rooftops to everyone that we know. But
it's not always helpful.
Right. Yes. Know your audience here. But but I think there are things, especially acknowledging that, like, this isn't something that's limited to when you get married. All of a sudden you become this person who now is a sexual being. Like, you have been that. And we know this because we see it all throughout culture and all throughout history, like people exploring all of that and trying to figure out what it even means.
And we experience it in our own bodies and our own lives too.
Yes. I mean, there's so much, like, again, talking about being the mom girls, they're going to go through so many things that it's important that I talk to them about, so that they're prepared, but also they can celebrate the way that God made their body.
Yeah.
But also they can do that well. And that's what we're really talking about today, is when we say stewarding it, like, we're being cautious to use every little ounce of what the Lord has given us for Him and in the way it was designed.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about today. So, do you have anything to add?
Well,
on that?
I just think I love the Bride of Christ, and I don't like throwing the church under the bus, but I will say part of holding her accountable means talking about what she hasn't always done well, and we are the church. So, I'm not talking about this arbitrary thing, but I think sometimes the church has talked about sexuality more from the stance of what we shouldn't do or what we don't do, and that's more how it's been defined by the act of stewarding it, which is, it's proactive. It's not just about what we don't do, but it's about what we choose to actively surrender and celebrate what it means to be a sexual being created in the image of God, whether we're married or we're single, and what kind of perspective we have. And so I think that has fed into sometimes why it feels wrong to talk about, or taboo to talk about sex and sexuality, is because it's so often been defined by the thou shalt nots.
Yes, absolutely. That's good.
So
it's the other side of the same coin, where on one side you have the celebration of sex and just whatever goes, and then you have the exact opposite of, it's such a holy, it's still worshipped, but in a way that it's untouchable, behind the veil, you can't see it, don't even go near it, and neither one of those are healthy or correct. And so it makes you either revel in it and be taken over by it, or worship it as this untouchable God, which is not how He intended it at all.
So let's divide this into two categories then, if we can. Let's talk about our sexuality in singleness. And then let's put it in the context of marriage. And so let's start with the first. And I just kind of want to dig into, like, what are we talking about? Like, we can talk in vague terms for sure, but also, and I'll give an example of something that has been on my mind, but just because I've had a lot of conversations about it. But one of the things that I have noticed, and it's not just because of social media now or anything like that, because it was totally a thing when I was a kid, and I was guilty of it too. And I don't want to get into, like, modesty, whatever here, but dressing for attention is something that I would put under how we could like exploit our sexuality as a single person, thinking even that it's innocent.
Yeah.
Now, the flip side of that is we could be dressing perfectly fine and somebody can tell you that they don't want to see your shoulders, whatever it is. So I'm not going extreme here, but I just want to like put some definitions or like some examples in place. Like, what are we talking about? Like when you're single, how can we steward those things well? How can we be thinking about that and make sure that we're celebrating appropriately, but also being righteous in the way that we should be? What does that look like? And I bring up the thing about dressing because one of my roles around here is just helping volunteers and staff who are on stage, right?
Yeah.
And especially in student ministries, there have been times where I've had to have conversations with people where I'm just like, you're not doing this on purpose. And I understand that. But in an effort to steward this well, you're going to go stand on stage and I need you to actively be thinking about what people are thinking about when you're on stage. Are they focused on you or are they focused on the Lord, right? So is what you're doing bringing glory to God, or is it even inadvertently bringing the attention on yourself? So that's kind of one of those examples. That's where I'm going with that. So I don't know if you have other thoughts, or I just want to put a name to it a little bit so we can define it better.
That is helpful. The whole time you're talking, it just comes back to what is your heart in it? And that's true, I think, in everything that we're going to talk about. It has to start there.
Yeah.
And if your heart is, I want people to bypass me and see Jesus in everything I do, everything I say, every whatever, then how you present yourself will ultimately fall under that.
Right.
And I know when I put certain things on what I'm trying to highlight.
Yes, exactly.
Now, depending on what mood I'm in that day, a sack might be more of what you don't want to highlight. But so there is that question of, are you wearing it to show off a little bit? And if so, why? And what? Like, just be honest with yourself. Be willing to be honest to go, am I just showing off because I need attention? And that's not necessarily a bad thing to understand. I don't think oh, hey, I feel like I need attention today. And that's gonna, for me, trigger a thought process of, okay, what's missing in me that I'm using this to get it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Like, it's less about who I'm attracting to me and more about how am I pointing to Jesus.
Exactly.
Like, that's where we want to start from.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I think about, like, when you were talking about the ways that we can exploit, I think, our sexuality, and this is true both for single and married people, but I think it probably feels especially challenging, at least it did for me when I was single, that the world's viewpoint, the place that they're coming from, especially in our culture, is I have a need and I have a right to fulfill my sexual desires. And that is actually not what the Bible teaches.
Right.
But it can be really hard that is an uphill battle because, as sexual beings, you do have physical sexual urges, whether you're married or whether you're single. And so if the world is telling you that's a need for you and you have a right to fulfill that in any way that you want, then that feels a lot easier to succumb to than to say, no, it looks different for me to steward this because I am single. And like I said, that can still go askew in marriage. But as a single person, because you don't have an outlet biblically for the act of sex, I think that's a real challenge. That's where sexuality can get exploited, is when you start to buy into what the world says more than what the Bible teaches.
Yeah, and I think the heart posture, that's really what it's going to come back to on everything that we talk about today. And we've talked about this a lot, so I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said, but it is, in any season of life, it is important that our focus is not on us and what we want even, or desire. It's what he wants and what he desires, what God wants, what God desires. And a lot of times having that be our focus, a lot of things will fall into place. Like over time, your desires start to kind of align, if that makes sense, you know, because you're consistently surrendering to the Lord, going, okay, this may be something that I really want, but I know that this is not okay for me right now, or this isn't what you have for me right now, or whatever. And eventually, I'm not saying you don't ever want those things, but I do think it becomes easier to go, yes, but this is why I'm not giving in to that temptation.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. One of my good friends she's a believer and she's same-sex attracted. And, you know, the Lord has never changed that desire in her heart. Like, she still struggles with the feelings of being same-sex attracted. But one of the things that she says over and over and over, even when she talks about it, is Jesus is better.
Yeah.
Jesus is better. And she has had to learn how to count the cost of stewarding her sexuality in a way different way than I will ever understand. But I am so grateful for how her obedience in that way to say, Jesus is better than anything I could get if I followed these urges, if they're not honoring to him, if they are not in line with the picture that he has clearly laid out in his word. Like, her courage and obedience in that is an incredible testimony to the goodness of God and to the fullness of, she's not a half person.
Right.
She's not she's not incomplete in any way because she's not married or because she's not attracted to men. Like, so that's the flip side of that is it can be a really incredible testimony when someone has walked that road and again chosen to be obedient to Jesus.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So, moving on to marriage, we've talked about singleness a little bit. What does that look like? Like, how does that shift between, obviously you can have sex in marriage, which is great and is a gift. But what is that? What are the ways that we can kind of turn that and not steward it well? Because there are still many, many things that we can do. Again, honestly, that seem innocent oftentimes, but can absolutely lead down a negative road. And some that are just blatant. Yeah. But, you know, just being honest. But, and like one of the things that I think about is, like flirting, stuff like that. I think is, you don't put it in the context and give it the seriousness that it probably deserves. Even as a married person, you know, I think oftentimes, like, you think, oh, okay, we're just joking around, whatever. And really quickly that can turn bad. Even if nothing's ever acted upon, even in your heart, that can turn. So I think that's a way that, like, just being aware of those things is a way of stewarding your sexuality and honoring your husband or your wife, if you're a man listening. But you know, things like that are the kinds of things that come to mind when I think about how do I steward my sexuality well as a married woman.
It seems from the outside looking in, the opportunities to be manipulative with it seem more easily available to you. Yeah. Whereas I would have to finagle some other things and go down a bunch of different paths. Yeah. If you need something, you can do a kind of bait and switch. Yeah. Sure. You know, which is not honoring to him in any way. Absolutely. It's kind of preying on his. Yeah.
That can be the perversion of a good gift is like, even if sex is allowed and encouraged and celebrated within marriage, it can be used in incorrect ways, in ways that are not honoring to either your spouse or to God. Absolutely. I think manipulation is one of those. I think one of the obvious ones is infidelity, you know? Yeah. And that becomes true once you're in a relationship, once you're married, is if sex happens outside of that context, again, to the person that you're married to, big no-no.
Right. Yes. Pornography would fall
Pornography would also fall under that.
Marriage.
Yep.
Oh, but women don't struggle with that, guys.
Lies.
Did you see me roll my eyes just now? Okay.
The devil would love for us and for women to believe that they are alone in the struggle of pornography, and time again I've just found that that's not true.
And what it is.
Women are just more fearful to talk about it because it's been painted as a men's only issue. And even though I don't deny it's particularly prevalent among men.
Sure.
It is increasingly common, and you know.
Listen, women aren't watching Bridgerton for the costumes alone.
Bridgerton.
They weren't. Like,
Go get them,
stop.
Sarah Hopkins.
That was one of the things that I had on my list, though. Like the things that you're inputting.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, the things that you watch or you listen to or you say or you the situations you put yourself in. And this is a blanket, like your whole life.
Yes.
Yeah.
All of that. What is it? Garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out.
You're welcome.
Catherine Finley used to tell us that multiple times in a week. Garbage in, garbage out, girls. But it's true. And
It is.
I have seen that play out in my own life. And I now have to be really, really mindful about what I'm watching.
Yeah.
Right.
And when to me, it's weird that would affect me far more than watching 7 Dateline episodes in a row, which you would think should not be the case.
Yeah.
Those I will
sure.
forget in an instant.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sticks with me and then comes up and plays up far more often than trying to figure out how to get away with murder.
Right.
What does that tell me about myself and my struggles and my desires?
Sure.
But that, to me, that is a real life example that you're using of what it looks like to steward your sexuality.
Yes.
Like, back with the Bible, 3 times in the Song of Solomon, which is big sex book in the Bible.
Yeah.
The daughters of Jerusalem 3 times are told, do not awaken love before it so desires.
Yeah.
And I think what that means is, when it comes to the context of stewarding our sexuality, knowing what awakens that within us, like what is it that like kind of lights that fire.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's true, you know, whether we're single or we're married, we have to be cognizant of what kinds of things are we consuming that are going to awaken a sinful desire in us that we need to run the other direction from. But also specifically as a single person, knowing something that might awaken a desire in you that's not sinful, and maybe even whatever it is, like you might be seeing something or hearing something or whatever, and it may not in and of itself be sinful, but if it awakens something in you that then you don't have an outlet for, or you find that to be a sincere struggle against, then it's exercising wisdom for you to know that about yourself and to say, no, I can't watch that show or I can't listen to that audiobook or whatever because that's going to become a stumbling block for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think there's a whole lot of discernment just in all of this that we have to be able to have, because we are all different.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate thing about this. There's not a one size like fits all fix for this. Like it different things are going to tempt different people, and we're all going to struggle with very different things. And so we have to be aware enough. I've said it before, but that whole thing that David keeps reiterating of examine my heart, that we have to be doing that often.
Yeah.
And it changes as your situations change too. Yeah. So we have to be aware of that.
Let's see. The way that stuff impacts how not just your thoughts, but your expectations, how you interact with other people, how you interact with potential spouses, your husband, what you expect from him now, because he's supposed to act. And even something as simple as, I love Jane Austen. I think she was a brilliant, it's not even what I think. She just was. She's a brilliant author. But there are times in my life when I can't even read her because I want what she wrote.
Yeah.
And that does not exist.
Sure.
And if I'm going to put that expectation on the men in my life that I want to marry, how unfair is that? It's setting him up for failure immediately.
Yeah.
Or to be the Russell Crowe gladiator character who's like, that's my favorite Valentine's Day movie, by the way. Fun fact. It's the perfect Valentine's Day movie. It's a man avenging his wife and child and setting the whole world to right. And it's just, he's perfect. But no man is that.
Right.
No man is that.
Not even Russell Crowe.
Not even Russell Crowe.
Sorry.
And so I have to kind of, when those things pop up, what I've noticed even within lustful thoughts, and when I say play them out, kind of getting to the root of them, not playing them out, but going, oh, that's where my brain's going.
Yep.
Not once when I start to examine where my brain is going, is it about the other person? It's always about me getting what I want out of that person.
Yeah.
And figuring that out has it's made me really sad for what I've allowed in my life thus far, because those things have been sown in me by myself, by what I consumed years ago, last week, whatever. They just keep building. And so trying to figure those out, going, oh, you did this. You did this.
Yeah, and I think in the context of marriage as well, you are then putting unrealistic and unspoken expectations on your spouse.
Yeah.
Which is completely unhealthy. Like you're really driving a wedge between the two of you without even realizing it. One of the questions, I don't know if y'all remember this, on our suggestion thing was talking about sex inside of marriage and how like we don't actually talk about that, and how it's healthy to have a good sex life, and how the Lord has given us this gift, and it's not the only gift that marriage brings, but it is one of them. And I just thought that was interesting, because I was like, that's actually true. Like, we don't talk about it a whole lot, because it's kind of like, you get to do this. Oh, you got there,
so must be fine now.
Right. When in reality, like, it's still not always rainbows and unicorns, like you go through seasons where it's more difficult, or it's awkward, or whatever. And having a good dialogue with your spouse about those things, I think, is critical. Because otherwise, you also, especially with like my upbringing, you can get, it can feel like an off topic, or like something that needs to be off limits to talk about, even in the context of like me and Chuck talking about it. When in reality, it's very healthy for us to talk about what are our desires, and what are those triggers for us, and how are we guarding those things, and then also what are the good things about this that we can do together, and those kinds of things are also really good and healthy to talk about. So I don't know, that question, I was like, oh, that's good. We need to dig into that a little bit, because for sure there's a whole lot after you get married.
It does feel like we set it up, we as in church culture, not necessarily this church, but church, that we set it up as get married so that you can do this. And one of the greatest gifts I think my mom and dad gave me was a picture of a marriage that was full of struggle, and watching my mom kind of submit to the Lord, trusting the Lord to change my dad. But towards the end, as he was sick and she was taking care of him, that's when I got to see the more and the point of all that intimacy that they had struggled through to get to this point where she was holding him. There was one night I woke up, he had a doctor's appointment or something, so they're staying with me. 1-bedroom apartment, sorry. But I had a sofa, and Dad was on that because he was, ill. So we put him in there. Mom was in my room. I woke up, she's gone. And I thought, oh crap, something's happened. So I go into the living room, and my sofa isn't huge. You guys have seen it, but they're scooshed in there like sardines, and she's just holding him. And I broke.
I'm
gonna cry right now.
Because I thought, oh, this is it. This is that covenant love that far surpasses everything I have thought that marriage was. This was what that whole thing meant. So I'm so thankful for that. But it did jar me into seeing that what I had built up for marriage was really tainted by sin. Really, really tainted.
Yes. And what the world tells us about marriage in particular, and also just about sex, is a very superficial view. To your point of what you were saying about just what it is biblically, it is so much more than that. It is that intimacy that you have with the Lord, but also with someone else that you get to have with one person. It's such a gift.
And it, again, with the biblical picture and that word yada, it's good news no matter who you are. It's good news no matter whether you're somebody that gets to get married, or whether you're somebody who gets to be single your whole life, because you can have that deep knowing and that deep intimacy but it looks different in some ways in marriage than it does in singleness. And I think we were talking about this last week when we were kind of prepping for this podcast, was also, no matter who you are, even though you are a sexual being and you are created to have yada with God and with other people, and then if you're married, also the physical sexual act of that, we are all also sexually broken. I don't care who you are.
That's true.
You're sexually broken. Even if you were somebody who, you know, wore the purity ring and you were a virgin up till your wedding night.
Kiss dating goodbye.
Exactly. Like,
oh my goodness.
Stupid.
Everybody has sexual brokenness, because sexual brokenness is not just physical either. A lot of it has to do with the things that we've believed. And sometimes there's a lot more to it. You know, sometimes there is trauma that we have to work through, where things have been done to us that were, you know, against God's design, that breaks his heart. Sometimes there's things that we've done that we have to repent of. And for all of us, there's a resetting mentally and spiritually of like the way that we think about sex. But all that is to say, we all come to this with brokenness. And so for all of us, there's redemption that needs to happen, and that's true in marriage too.
Absolutely.
Like, getting married does not fix your sexual brokenness, and you're fooling yourself if you think that it will.
I feel like it would just bring it like the big spotlight on it.
Honestly,
Now you have to show somebody all of the ooh.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it sounds great.
She said no, thank you.
It sounds great. I think thinking about how do you take those desires and urges, and when those things arise, how do you steward that? How do you manage that? And sometimes, and you and I have talked a little bit, because we were in our office one day and a friend of ours comes in, they're talking about how great it is that they're married and they just get to have sex all the time. And when they walked out, I looked at Jess and said, that was super unhelpful. Because for whatever reason, as your bodies change and as hormones do whatever they're doing as you age, they just sometimes are a little bit more active than others. And so when you get to hear, I want to rejoice that your marriage is really successful and healthy.
Yeah.
But that did not.
I don't need the details.
I don't need the details.
Read the room.
So taking that home and reminding the Lord, like he needs my reminding, but probably admitting to myself, like, hey, this morning, this night, whatever, I have this urge, this desire, and I can't do a thing about it. That would be holy.
Right. Yes.
That's,
Yes.
And so you're going to have to meet me in this and not take it away. I've stopped asking him to take it away, but to help me just to bear it. And be that, meet my desire is kind of how I'm approaching it right now. I don't know if that's how you're supposed to, but if you gave me this and I don't have an outlet for it because we live in a broken, stupid world. Even, sorry, Lord, your creation's not stupid, but it's broken. Then you're going to have to provide a way for me to manage this. And sometimes I'm successful and sometimes I'm not. And that's when I look at this thing I have in my bathroom that reminds me that his mercies are new every morning. Great is his faithfulness. Because I have to have that. Because otherwise shame will lay me out.
That was the piece that when you were talking about us all being sexually broken, I'm sure that probably the majority of people listening have some element of shame attached to when we talk about sex. And I'm sure that looks different for everyone, but we don't talk about that enough. And I think it's important to just spit out here that shame is not from the Lord.
No.
Now, if you are feeling like, man, I shouldn't have done that, you are correct. And that may well be the Holy Spirit convicting you of something. But if you are just racked with guilt and shame about something that you've done that you obviously cannot take back, that's not from him. He offers forgiveness. He offers mercy. And it is, Lord, forgive me for this specific thing that I have done. And then you just move on. And you've got to be able to let yourself off the mat. Because I think it is, there's probably another element of this where like we're carrying around our past. And it's really us holding ourselves back. You know, it's not God holding us back. It's us doing it. When in reality, I mean, this moment right now is a new moment.
Clean slate.
Absolutely.
And his forgiveness is so much greater than anything that we could ever imagine.
Yes.
And that, for me, when we've talked about how difficult that is, because you want it doesn't seem possible. It's too good to be true.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's one of those things that it is too good to be true, but it is true.
Yeah.
And oh gosh.
Yeah.
But, and just the grace that when you find yourself in that place again,
Yeah.
and you say, here we are again. I thought I had killed this.
Yeah.
It does. I was telling a friend one day, when I fall into those sin patterns, it feels like I have resurrected that old, nasty, dead self and tried to give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to a corpse.
Yeah.
That's the picture that I'm asking the Lord to remind me before I take that step
Yeah.
of, do you really want to get that close to a decaying, gray,
Right.
gross,
We've been here
dead
before,
body?
and it
Do you
didn't
want to do
work.
that?
Really good metaphor. I'm going to take that away.
Listen, you got to have something that makes you go, that's worse than that moment of pleasure or whatever it is. But
And that's fleeting.
Yeah.
That's the other
fleeting.
thing.
Yeah.
If we can remind ourselves, especially in such an instant gratification world, if we can remind ourselves that like the fast fix is not the best one.
Yeah. And like that is the sex was created for pleasure. That was part of how God created sex.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing. Like for those of us who get to be married and experience that, it should be good. But because our sexuality is bigger than that, like what you were talking about, like directing your desires to the Lord and taking that back to Him, that is the picture of intimacy. Like that is what it looks like to steward your sexuality. And that is also true in marriage. Again, like that word encompasses all of us, but the intimacy part of yada is the thing that is not fleeting. That is the thing. That is that's the stuff that carried your parents in those moments on the couch. That's the stuff that that is the very heart of God. And it's true in our relationship with Him, but it also needs to be true in our relationship with others. And again, true whether we're single or married. You still need to have intimate, close, loving relationships with people, even if there is not the act of sex involved in any of those. We still need to have intimate, close relationships with people, and with our spouse, there's a physical component to that. But we also have those kinds of relationships with people that we're not married to, but we still need to have that reflection of intimacy, of the knowing of someone as a brother or sister in Christ. So
And as an image bearer.
and that is that's not fleeting. That is the long-term stuff of love.
It's putting, whenever I allow sin to just kind of take the reins, when I'm out of it and you're in that shameful moment and I realize what I have done to that person, what I could control, and use them not as the Lord intended, it breaks me because that is His son.
Yeah.
That is His creation. And I just looked at it and said, it's kind of garbage and not worth honoring.
Right.
And I hate myself when I do that.
Well, yeah. And it's, I mean, we've all been guilty of that. And it's selfish. It's our selfish tendency. Which is the opposite of the selfless nature of Christ. So I think just kind of bringing that back to like the root of God's character and how are we reflecting His character, even in stewarding our sexuality. That's a good example of that. So, well, we have a load of resources that we are going to drop in show notes for this one, because again, there's no way we could cover everything. I just think honestly, this episode to my mind is a really great jumping off point.
Yeah.
So if you're doing a group or you have friends or whatever, and or you need to talk about this with people, I think this is a good starting point, because again, the conversation, honestly, we could talk forever about this. Like, this is the fastest hour ever for a podcast.
Are we already done?
We're at 53
Girl,
minutes.
I know.
Insane.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, there's so many facets of this. Like, we could go down so many different roads, and unfortunately don't have time to. Although, who knows? Maybe there will be a part 2, 3, 4, whatever. But we are going to drop a lot of resources in case you want to dive a little bit deeper. Books, podcasts, that kind of stuff. Websites in the show notes. So there will be a whole load of things that you can look at. But we've reminded each other of the positive things about our sexuality, and that is the most important thing that we could have done today.
Mm-hmm.
But also the secondary thing, I think it's just so important to remember that no matter where you are, no matter what, no matter how broken your heart is or your past is or whatever it is, all you have to do is take that to the Lord. And his forgiveness is instantaneous, and he loves you that much, and he desires for you to be how he created you.
Yeah.
And that is possible. And it doesn't mean that we will be perfect. We will mess up. You will mess up. That's okay. But again, like you said, his mercies are new
every morning.
every morning.
And there's you don't have any sin that is bigger than his forgiveness.
Exactly.
None.
Nope.
Exactly.
And when we say like living into who he created you to be, that is specifically in the context of like what it means to be a fully redeemed creation of Christ.
Yes.
So even when that feels like you're having to fight against what feels like natural urges or desires, so, you know, whether that's someone who's same-sex attracted and you're fighting against that, or whether that's someone who is, you're single and you're having to fight against, you know, acting out sexually in a way that's not honoring to God, or whether you're married and you're fighting against acting out sexually in a way that's not honoring to God. Fighting against those urges is not being untrue to yourself. You are actually the most yourself when you are being true to your redeemed self.
Yes.
When you're being true to the righteousness that God wants you to live in and that you will experience in eternity.
Yes.
That is actually when you are being the most true to who you were created to be.
Yeah, right.
Even when sometimes it feels like you're fighting against your nature, you're having to fight against sin. You're not fighting against what God created you to be.
Exactly. You're
So-
fighting your sin nature.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're resurrecting that dead, blue, saggy skinned corpse.
Yes, that's disgusting.
You're welcome.
Ugh.
It's been submerged in water, you know, because you've been baptized, and so you're just, it's like,
Let's make it work. What? It's fine. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, thank you for tuning in to this episode. It is, I know it can be awkward, and there are probably lots of things that people are like, can't believe they just said that on air. But I do think it's important that we have the conversation as women. Like, it's so important to talk about and to guard well and to steward well. And all of this is done so that we try to live as holy a life as possible until we meet the Creator and he gives us brand new bodies with no shame and no sin and no pain and all the things. So,
Hallelujah.
come, Lord Jesus.
yes, exactly. All right, y'all. We'll catch you next time on Tell Me More.